Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our inaugural AYA Talks event, Charting Your Course, Education Planning After a Cancer Diagnosis. This is a series brought to you by the Inova Adolescent and Young Adult Program in partnership with Inova Peterson Life with Cancer. And the purpose of this series is really that we hope to periodically provide guidance and education on real life and real talk for AYA patients with cancer. Some housekeeping items before we get started. Um, we will have about, 50 minutes to an hour of content, and we will have be joined by a wonderful AYA patient who has agreed to be a guest speaker, and so that will be near the end of our presentation. Please feel free to send any questions via the chat or the Q&A button at the bottom. We will probably wait to address all questions until the end. We'll have about 15 minutes set aside, let's give or take, for questions. But during the presentation, we'll probably wait to answer those questions until the end. But feel free as things come up to send them in the chat, and I'll be monitoring. We ask that because we are recording this webinar that we try to keep questions general and refrain from sharing too many personal details so that we can be mindful of your personal privacy, whether you are a patient or a caregiver. And as I mentioned, this is going to be recorded. So you will be able to access the recording to this presentation on the Inova Peterson Life with Cancer YouTube page in probably hopefully a couple days. We will be going through some great information and resources throughout this presentation. It will be a lot of information, potentially just to absorb in the moment, but don't worry. I'm going to be sending out the copy of the slides as well as the scholarship list that will be referenced to all the emails that were included in the registration. So if you used your email to register for this class, you'll be getting that. If for whatever reason it's a different email you'd like that information to be sent to, you'll have my contact information at the end that you can let me know, and I can make sure I get those slides and resources for you. All right, so without much further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce both myself as well as our keynote speaker tonight. My name is Gemma, and I am a pediatric oncology behavioral health therapist with the Inova Peterson Life with Cancer program. So I currently work in the PSV Center for Cancer and Blood Disorders, which is located on the seventh floor of the Inova Shar. And my role here in clinic is to provide therapeutic support and programming to our patients and families. Our keynote speaker for this session is Vanessa Wagner. Vanessa is an education navigator with the Ask Childhood Cancer Foundation, and she also primarily works in the PSV clinic. Vanessa's role involves supporting patients and families in their education journey through 504 and IEP plans, school reentry, college preparation, and career readiness. Vanessa comes to us with a wealth of knowledge as a former as a former educator and working as a math teacher at a local Loudoun County public school for 6 years. So welcome, Vanessa. We're so happy to have you. Oh, you're on mute.
There we go.
There we
I
go.
have too many screens up right now. Hello everyone. Gemma, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm very excited and honored to be here. As Gemma said, I was a high school teacher in the past, and I always love seeing the incredible things that my students would do post high school, whether it was going to college, opening up their own business, finding a trade that they loved, starting to work directly in their field, whatever it was, I just love seeing my students pursue their passions. So my goal for today is to help you do the same. The possibilities after high school are endless, and I just want to help you as much as I can in getting started towards your future career. So, like Gemma said, I will be covering quite a few topics today, but the good news is that you will have access to these slides later on. So don't worry. So here are a few things I'll be talking about today. We're going to briefly talk about some scholarship opportunities, college accommodations, different paths you can take, and then just some final education and career resources at the end. So I'm going to start by talking about scholarships. Now, a lot of times when you hear the word scholarship, you immediately think college. However, I want to stress that a lot of these scholarships can actually be applied to various different paths that you take. They can be for vocational school, trade school, internships, volunteer, traveling, and so many other things. So just because we're talking about some scholarships, don't necessarily just think that we're talking about college-oriented scholarships. So just keep that in mind as we go through some of these. There are some scholarships, however, that are just specifically for college. When it comes to college, as many of you probably know, there are a lot of expenses. You have to pay tuition, purchase books, pay for housing, meal plans, and so on. But a lot of organizations are here to help with these expenses, and they offer scholarships to eliminate this financial burden. So some organizations will pay just for housing, and then others will give you some funds to pay for books. So there's just a lot of different options out there in terms of scholarships. Before we start getting into specific scholarships that are available for you, I do want to give you guys kind of a quick rundown of just some things you might need before applying for scholarships. So, all scholarships have different requirements. Um, this list that I came up with is kind of just similarities that I found when I was looking at different scholarships. So, the first thing that 99% of scholarships need, especially for students that had cancer in the past or are currently going through treatment. The number one thing that they need is a diagnosis verification. So scholarships will either provide you with a form that you need to fill out and get verified by your provider, or they will simply just ask for a signed letter from your provider. But again, this is just something good to keep in mind before you're starting the application process because unfortunately, some of these things do take time, so you do want to get a head start. The second thing that you might need is a college acceptance letter, or if you're looking at trade school or vocational school, sometimes they also require like a trade school acceptance letter. So just make sure that when you get this in the mail or if you get it electronically, that you keep a copy with you so that you can submit this when you're applying for scholarships. Most scholarships will require an essay, which I know is kind of a handful, but the good news is that a lot of these scholarships they kind of ask you around the same question about how diagnosis has impacted your life, or a similar question like that. So definitely make sure to save your essay so that you can use it when you're applying for a bunch of different scholarships. In this case, it's okay to copy and paste and use that essay over again and save yourself some time. The fourth thing that scholarships might ask for is an official transcript. So make sure you ask your current school for a copy of your most recent transcript. If you do forget to do this, you can always email or call your school, and they will definitely have it on record, even a couple years after you leave. But again, it's just always better to have on hand and to do this sooner rather than later. So if you're in high school now, I definitely would make sure that you keep that on hand. The last thing, this, I'm not going to say that every scholarship I looked at asked for this, but there's a good amount. Um, a few scholarships, especially the bigger ones, will ask for a letter of recommendation. So usually this can be from any impactful adult in your life, like a teacher, a coach, a community leader, a doctor, anything along those lines. So just be sure to save their contact in case you need to ask them to write you a letter. If you are applying for colleges, a lot of times you'd already need a letter of recommendation. So I know when I was a high school math teacher, a lot of my students, they would kind of phrase it like, oh, since you're writing my college letter of recommendation, do you mind just saving that letter of recommendation because I'm planning on applying for scholarships? And then it was super easy because I just pretty much submitted the same letter. So I definitely would keep that in mind if you're talking to teachers or coaches or whoever's writing this letter of recommendation. Again, I know I mentioned this in the beginning, but it is important to note that all scholarships are different, and they all have different requirements. These were just a few of the most common requirements I noticed. So make sure to give yourself plenty of time to apply and gather everything you need. A lot of scholarships will have a due date, so you want to start the process at least a month before the due date, just so you have time to gather like the diagnosis verification, the letter of recommendation. You're giving yourself time to write that essay. So definitely just try to give yourself ample amount of time. I do want to dive in just to a few specific scholarships, just so you kind of know what's out there and what's available. So the first scholarship we have is the Sofia Blanco Scholarship. This is a $2,000 scholarship, and it's open to childhood cancer patients and survivors. It can be used for tuition, room and board, and the cool thing is that you actually will also receive a laptop if you get the scholarship. I put the QR code there. Or you can go to their website and you will find more up-to-date information about the scholarship. When I last checked, these were the dates that the website had. But again, I would definitely check that frequently if this is a scholarship that you're interested in applying in. On that same site, the cool thing is that you'll also find another scholarship called the Gabriela Blanco Scholarship. This is a $2,000 scholarship. It's essentially the same. You also get a laptop, but this is specifically for siblings of patients and survivors. So that's another cool one to keep in mind, and it's all within the same website. We have two more well-known scholarships. The first one is the My Hometown Hero Scholarship. This scholarship ranges from $1,000 to $10,000. And the neat thing about this one is that you can apply at any time during your college career as long as you have one more year left. So if you're a sophomore in college, if you're a junior in college, you can still apply and get some money from the scholarship. And it can also be used towards trade school or vocational school. And you can apply if you're in between the ages of 17 and 39, which is a pretty nice gap. So that's definitely a good one to look into. Another one is the Izzy Foundation Scholarship. Um, this scholarship is cool because it actually kind of splits it up. So it gives you $500 each year for up to 3 years. So in total, you would receive 1,500. And again, I put the QR codes on there, and you'll get copies of these slides. But I definitely suggest looking into these scholarships. So those were just four very specific scholarships. But when I tell you that there's hundreds out there, there's a lot of organizations that truly want to help you and to give scholarships. If you ever need help finding scholarship information, you can definitely reach out to me or Gemma or anyone part of the Innova team. And usually we have a list to give you. Also, even if you just do a simple Google search, you will find that there's hundreds of scholarships available to you. So I definitely would take that into consideration, and use that to your advantage. Okay, so we talked a little bit about scholarships, and helping to finance college. Now I want to get into some supports for when you are actually in college. And I'll talk more about this later, but this also applies to different schools, different educational routes. You can apply for accommodations in trade school as well. So, in case you don't know what accommodations are just supports and services provided to you that will just allow you to have equal access and opportunity to benefit from classes, programs, and activities. So, they're just extra supports that you can receive in the classroom. If you had a 504 plan or an IEP in school, college accommodations are very similar. There's a whole range of accommodations available depending on your unique needs. We will go through the steps of how to request accommodations in a second, but you will have to register and work with the Disability Service Office, or DSO, which I'll probably refer to a couple times. So if I say DSO, just know I'm talking about the Disability Services Office. This office sometimes has a different name depending on your school. So sometimes it might be called Student Support Services. It might be called Office of Accessibility, but regardless of the name, they all provide the same services. And if you have trouble finding the office, your college advisor or the registrar can definitely help you contact this office. So, before we get into like the steps of how you get these accommodations, I just kind of want to put on your radar what is available to you. So again, just like the scholarships, there's a whole list, but I fear I would be here all night if I gave you the whole list of accommodations that you can receive. So these are just some common college accommodations that are most popular and most used, but again, there's a wide range of accommodations you can ask for. So these are a few of the common ones for exams. So on exams, you can receive extended time. You can have a reader or a scribe to help you complete the exam. You can also request a test in a quiet room with no distractions. You can request the use of a laptop or have access to a calculator. You also have accommodations that can be used in the classroom. Um, so you can request note-taking services. The way this works is usually the college will ask another student in your class to provide you with copies of their notes. So it's pretty cool because you will receive notes from another student, a classmate that's in that same lecture or class, and they can provide you copies of their notes. You can also have interpreters, you can have textbooks in alternate formats, and you can also have preferential seating. And then in general, so that was specifically for classes, but in general, overall with the college, um, one big one is that you can ask for priority in registering for courses. So this is when you pick out your classes. This might be super helpful if you are looking for particular classes or if you're looking for online courses. So usually there's classes, especially the online courses that fill up really quickly. So if you have this in your accommodations, it kind of gives you priority so that you can get into that class before they fill up. And then there's also some other things where you can ask for audio recordings, access to audio books, voice recognition software, and so on, all just to further support your college experience. So those were the accommodations you can ask for. And again, there's a bunch of other ones. And now I just want to talk about the steps into getting accommodations. So unfortunately, if you do have a 504 IEP, I wish it was easy and you could just take that paper and they would just transfer over, but unfortunately, that is not the case. Every college is different, but most colleges will require you to go through kind of a lengthy process to get accommodations. So just to make sure you're prepared before you take that journey, I want to run through some of these steps just so you get an idea of what to expect. And again, I know this is a lot of info that I'm throwing at you, but all of these will be provided in the slides. So the first step is you want to contact the Disability Service Office. So this was the office we talked about in the beginning, that it can be called something different, but it'll be somewhere along the same lines. So you will have to register with this office as a student with a disability. You want to start this process as early as possible to make sure that you get accommodations before your first day. Um, the earlier you start this, the better because you can also use accommodations on placement tests. So I know you might have to take like a math placement test, or a writing placement test, or whatever placement test, depending on the program. But you can actually use accommodations on those tests. So again, the earlier you start this process, the better. So once you register with the office as a student with a disability, the next step is going to be to meet with the DSO staff member and to provide any documentation you might have. So usually the office will tell you specifically what they need, but most of the time they will need a letter from your provider, a copy of past 504 IEP plans, or a copy of any past accommodations you received in school. So that's why I always stress that you really want to try to get all the documentation you can from your high school just so that you can carry this on. So make sure you have a copy of your 504 plan or any accommodations you might have received just to make this process a little easier. The next step is you're going to have a conversation with the DSO staff member. Um, so especially if you don't have that documentation, just having a conversation is helpful. They're going to ask you what type of accommodations you're looking to receive in college, what would be helpful. It's always a smart idea if you come up with a list beforehand. That way you're prepared, and you know what you want when you're going into that office. So just think about accommodations you've used in the past, think about what has worked, what hasn't worked, and what you might look for in college. Step four, so the next step in this process is the DSO is then going to take all the documentation you gave the office, um, look into all the conversations you had, and they're going to decide if you're eligible for services. If you are approved, the staff will figure out what accommodations the college can provide, and then they're going to give you a letter of accommodations that essentially just lists out all the accommodations you've been approved for. So they'll give you that documentation, and it'll clearly state like what accommodations you have. This next step is super important. You have to give this letter to your professor and talk with them about how these accommodations will work. So, the reason I say this is super important is because a lot of students assume that the college will just tell your professors or the office will just communicate with the professors. Unfortunately, that is not the case. You yourself have to go to your professors and provide them a copy of your accommodations letter, and your accommodations will only start when you give the letter to your professor. So that's why it is highly recommended that you do this the first day of classes, and just give them a copy of that letter. If the professors have any questions, you can always direct them to the DSO office if you don't feel comfortable answering them yourself. But the professors must give you these accommodations, and they also must keep everything confidential. And then the very last step is just to make sure that you're paying attention to your accommodations throughout the semester. Make sure they're working for you. Take note if you need any other additional accommodations, if you need to change any accommodations. And just keep in mind that you can contact the DSO at any time to discuss any changes you would like to make. And then these are just some key points to remember. So, one thing that I always like to recommend is you definitely want to make sure that you're keeping in constant communication with your college advisor. So, everyone is assigned a college advisor, and this is someone whose job it is to help you through this whole process. So, it's always nice to get in contact with that person. Be transparent with them, tell them what accommodations you're looking for, and they are someone who will definitely help you out. And again, an IEP plan, 504 plan can be very useful when planning for college accommodations. But again, these plans do not directly transfer to college. So just make sure that you know that ahead of time. I've had a lot of students, unfortunately, just assume that their 504 plan will transfer, and they didn't go through the whole process that they needed to go through. So again, I just want to reiterate that it sadly does not directly transfer, and you're still going to have to register and go through the whole process. The next thing, I know it's a bit intimidating, but just don't be afraid to stick up for yourself and to remind your professors your accommodations. From the professor's perspective, they're dealing with a lot of students, so sometimes they might not be providing you a calculator or a laptop or things that you might need. So just make sure that you're self-advocating, and reminding your professors of your accommodations, and just make sure to provide them a copy of that letter that the office gives you. There's a whole website filled with resources specifically on this topic. It's called Think College. It's a great resource. So if you are finding yourself wondering more about this topic, wondering more about accommodations, they have a lot of webinars, a lot of videos, just a lot of resources when it comes to figuring out college accommodations. So they're very helpful. I put their QR code right here, but if you just type in Think College, it'll also come up. So again, I just want to put this out there, just some things to keep in mind. Many young adults that are facing or have faced cancer treatment will find their timeline shifting. And I know that sometimes can be frustrating, but just remember that it's okay if you have delays in starting college or you have interruptions throughout your college career. This is very normal. It's expected, so just don't get discouraged if it takes you a few extra semesters to get your degree. There's a lot of people here who want to support you. I want to support you. There's people at your college who want to support you. So definitely just keep that in mind. There's also a lot of organizations out there that want to help as well. So I want to introduce two of those organizations. The first one is Bird Cancer Foundation. They provide assistance with school reentry, accommodations, and career transition. So again, that's a good one to look at. And Triage Cancer provides educational materials about any legal or practical issues you might come across. So this covers more accommodations, and they can also help with stuff like understanding your health insurance, managing finances, and just a variety of different topics. So again, don't be afraid to ask for help and just know that there's a lot of organizations out there who are built to provide extra resources for you. So I know I just went on a whole tangent about colleges and I talked a lot about college, but I do want to remind you that there are so many different paths you can take post high school. The educational path that you decide to take is unique to you. Um, and it's my goal to make sure you feel confident in your choice to explore options that align with what you want to do. And sometimes that means not taking the traditional college route. So I do want to give you guys just some different options and a few different directions that you can go if you choose to not go down the college route. So one of those routes, which I mentioned a little bit about before, there are many vocational trade schools and technical programs available. So these programs are often much shorter than the 4-year degree. You can earn many different certifications and gain specific skills towards a direct career path. So this one you will most likely be in a classroom setting, but again, it is much shorter than the 4-year degree. Some examples of fields you can enter through trade school and technical programs are electrician, information technology, so IT, cybersecurity, culinary arts, medical assisting. There's just so many different fields you can enter through this route, so it's definitely a great route to explore. Um, some benefits are that it does allow you faster entry into the workforce. It's also often lower cost than a traditional degree, and there is just such a high demand in many trades, so you are very likely to find a job quickly after finishing the program. And again, I want you to keep in mind that there are scholarships out there that will help pay for trade school and vocational programs. Many local community colleges also offer these programs, and then, of course, there are also dedicated trade schools throughout the country. Another path is apprenticeships. So this is a learn while you earn model. So oftentimes, in this case, you will not be in a classroom setting. Instead, you will work with an experienced professional who will teach you a specific trade or profession. Some examples of the careers, again, there is a little overlap to trade schools. This is just another route, but there are construction trades like carpentry, electrical work, plumbing. You can also go into IT, healthcare, culinary arts. And again, these are just a few examples. You will get paid while you're learning and receive credentials and certifications needed to continue your career. So, this is also a great choice. It's always nice to get paid while you're learning. It's a great model. If you check with your state's Department of Labor and Apprenticeship Office, they usually have a list of updated companies that are offering this route. You can also check in with any local companies, and usually they will have apprenticeships available as well. The next one we have, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but the next one we have is online learning and certifications. This is like a great flexible opportunity. So you can take online courses that will lead you to specific certifications. Or if you're not ready to start college, but you do want to go to college in the future, you can always get a head start on completing some course requirements. So this is another great option for that. There are so many different platforms. There's edX, Code Academy, and just there's so many listed there. And the cool thing is that some of these platforms have actually partnerships with colleges or trade schools or even companies. So if you take a course through one of these platforms, you can receive direct credit and apply it to one of those options. So for instance, if you're in college or you're looking to fulfill some college credits, and let's say you want to take a math class in college, but they don't have an online version of that math class in your college, you can look at one of these platforms to see if they have a partnership with your college to see if you can take the math class through one of these and then transfer it. Um, so again, a big benefit is the flexibility. You have a lot of access to a lot of different content. It's often more affordable. Sometimes there's a membership fee, but again, there's a lot of scholarships that you can apply towards paying for that membership fee. And yeah, it's cool that there's so many partnerships with a lot of these. Another option is community college. I know I mentioned it briefly while talking about trade schools. Um, but community colleges do offer career-focused programs that lead directly to employment. So community college is lower in tuition, you can live at home, and you have options in which educational path you would like to take. So similar to the online classes, you can either go directly to a career or you can use community college to help you down another educational path. So for instance, you can complete some college credits at your community college and then transfer those to a university later on. Let's say you just completely want to break from work, from the classroom setting. There are also a lot of gap year programs and service and volunteering opportunities. So there are many programs out there that actually offer structured gap years, or volunteer experiences where you can travel and experience new cultures and industries. So AmeriCorps, United Planet, EF Language Abroad, those are all just wonderful programs that offer a lot of experiences. So for a lot of those, you'll go to a different country, you'll experience the culture, and you'll do volunteer work. So that's another way that you can um, fill your time, and um, it's a great resume builder. Um, and yeah, so that's a great option as well. My last two that I'm talking about is direct entry into the workforce. So you can also just go directly into the workforce. Many companies do offer internal training and opportunities for advancement. So just because you begin at an entry level position, it doesn't mean you'll stay at an entry level position because a lot of companies do have opportunities and trainings where you can do the trainings and work your way up in the company. And lastly, you can start a small business or freelancing. So if you have a skill or a passion, you can turn this into income. So some examples are graphic design is a big one, social media is another big one, crafting, tutoring, personal training, so forth. Of course, a big benefit of this is that you can be your own boss and gain real world business experience. There's also a lot of programs out there that provide funding and assistance with starting a small business. And another thing you can keep in mind is that you can start small and build your way up. So I know a very popular one, for example, is Etsy, but Etsy kind of allows you to start small with your small business and then sell your materials or your crafts. Or even I've seen a lot of marketing on there as well. And then you can sell that and then use that to build on your small business. So that's also a great option. And then again, just some things to consider. There are so many different paths out there, and your educational path is unique to what you want to do. So definitely make sure that you're exploring all of your options and you're kind of keeping an open mind to everything that's out there because there's just so much opportunity. I also want to make sure that you are checking in with yourself and you just take note of what you think you can and cannot manage. So, for instance, at times you might want to prioritize options that offer more flexibility or match with your energy levels. You also just want to make sure that you have your support systems in place throughout your educational journey. So always remember that your health comes first no matter what. So you want to make sure that you have support through your medical team, your family, your support groups. Also, keep in mind that disability services, those do not just apply to college accommodations. I know I talked a lot about college accommodations, but you can actually receive disability services through a lot of educational programs or careers that you pursue. And lastly, as I mentioned before, many paths offer financial aid. There are scholarships that can be used for vocational school and just different programs. So just be sure that once you find a path that you want to take, that you do some research because there's just so many financial aid opportunities available for you. Before I end my portion of talking to you about education and career, I do want to just give you some more resources. I know I've been giving you so many resources already, but there's just so much out there that I want to make sure that you're aware of. Because again, there's just so many organizations out here that want to help and want you to achieve your goals. So these are some important ones. So, um, Cancer for College is an organization, and they also provide scholarships, medical debt relief, educational workshops, mentorship groups, and networking opportunities. It's a great resource for young adults and really provides a lot of helpful stuff. It also provides opportunities to connect with other young adults. They have events and just virtual meetups. So that's definitely a great option to look into. Connecting Champions is another great resource. They connect you with the mentor to help give you more insight into future careers. So this one's really cool because, for instance, let's say you want to become a chef, they will actually pair you with a current chef that you can talk to and ask questions. So you can meet with them as many times as you would like. You can ask them what you need to pursue that career, and this can just lead to great internships, opportunities, and it also kind of gives you a head start on the certifications that you need, the classes you could take, and so forth on what you need to achieve that. Another one is Cancer and Careers. Um, they are primarily to help you once you're in the workplace. So they provide advice and workshops pertaining to careers. They can also help you with finding a job, building a resume, the interview process, exploring career options, and so on. So this is definitely a resource that can come in handy in the future. As Childhood Cancer Foundation is actually the foundation that I work for, so of course I have to give it a little shout out. Right now, this is a Virginia specific organization. Our hope is that it'll grow, but ASK provides educational support from preschool to adulthood. So we have resources to assist you in conversations with your school, especially when it does come to those conversations about accommodations. We also have a variety of workshops such as SAT prep, college and trade school tours, job readiness skills, and there's just a lot of different workshops that we offer. So definitely make sure to check out our website if you get the chance. The last two resources that I'll talk about, so I'll start with the bottom one first, just because I mentioned it already. So that's Think College. Again, that's a resource that just provides assistance in navigating college options and accommodations. It has a lot of resources and videos that talk about accommodations in colleges. It also lists colleges and universities that have programs for students with intellectual disabilities. Um, and again, it just has so many resources. Another thing that they really focus their attention on is providing resources to help with the transition from high school to college. So that is a big jump, and there are a lot of differences. So they do have a lot of videos and a lot of resources just to give advice on how to handle that transition. And then Niche is a popular college search engine. It is free and it can just help you narrow down a college that fits you best. When you first go into the website, it'll ask you to take a college quiz, and then it just tries to narrow down colleges based on things that are important to you. So it breaks down the application process, acceptance rate, SAT, all that good stuff. The cool thing is that it also has reviews from students that attend just so you can get a more personal look inside the college. And it has virtual tours, which is cool. So I definitely, if you're kind of up in the air, there's so many colleges up there. And if you don't know how to narrow it down, I definitely would take a look at their website. Okay, I'm gonna hand it back over um,
Yes.
to Gemma.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. That was so wonderful. I really appreciate the breadth of information that you provided. I think it's so helpful, and I learned many new things myself today. And so I want to take a moment because peer support is so important throughout the cancer journey, especially for adolescents and young adults. So before I introduce our very own AYA patient who has agreed to be a guest speaker today, I wanted to share a few additional resources for community support because I think that's a really important part of the journey, especially when, having the opportunity to ask others what maybe worked for them. Um, so if you can go ahead to the next slide. So we at Peterson Life with Cancer offer a plethora of support groups, social opportunities, and educational events that cater to the AYA community. Um, I have highlighted two here that are support groups, one for the kind of younger age range, one for the older age range, since AYA is 15 to 39, and we want to make sure we're inclusive of that whole group. You can always check out the offerings at Life with Cancer through the calendar that you registered for this course. Um, but there's many things throughout the year, and it's just an opportunity to connect with others. Most programs at Life with Cancer are open nationally unless otherwise noted, and all the programs are available to patients no matter where treatment is received, since we typically do a virtual and hybrid model. And then, of course, there are so many other great programs, and you're probably like, oh my gosh, I have so many resources to check out. But that's really one of our goals for these AYA talks. We want to make sure you have the tools in your own hands because every journey is so individual and unique. But these are four of some of our favorite organizations to share with families and our AYA patients. Elephants and Tea is a great organization that provides programming, meetups, virtual happy hours, all kinds of things. But they also have a one-of-a-kind magazine that features stories written by AYA patients. It's a great place to go, if not only to hear from other AYA patients, but if you're ever interested in telling your own story, I really encourage looking into submitting. Um, they accept all submissions, and it's just a great way to get out there and be empowered by your own story. The Cactus Cancer Society is an organization that provides support groups. It has wellness programs. It has a lot of creative arts programs for those who like to read, like to draw, like to write. And it's another way to kind of meet other AYA patients in a setting where you're working on something else and not maybe just focused on the cancer experience. Cancer Buddy is a free app that you can download that gives you access to moderated forums with other patients, survivors, and caregivers. So I say moderated because they do have professionals that make sure that whenever there's emotional support or other resources needed, they can step in. But it's a great place to not only get connected with patients that might be a similar age, but maybe geographical region, maybe in the same treatment center. Since we know that as much as it might sound like you can just meet people when you're in the clinic or the infusion center, it's not always that simple. We're not always up for socializing in those moments, but we want those connections. And lastly, I wanted to share about Stupid Cancer. They host all kinds of events in person and virtual that are really, really popular with patients. And they also host the annual CancerCon, which is usually in Washington, D.C., which is a convention where patients and professionals in the AYA community can get together, share resources, connect, and is a really great opportunity. So, I am very excited to welcome our AOA guest speaker, Conlon, who has graciously agreed to share his experiences today. Hi, Conlon. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Gemma. Thank you for having me, and I'm glad that I was able to come here, speak with you all, and
Yeah,
looking forward to
absolutely.
it.
So, Conlon, if to start, if you could please go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe share a bit about your diagnosis and your treatment journey.
Yeah, so my name is Conlon Roop. I was diagnosed during my first year of college, actually. I was diagnosed with stage 3 B-cell Burkitt's lymphoma and ended up going through 7 rounds of chemo after that, finished chemo this past October, and yeah, I got diagnosed during my first year of college. I was about 2 weeks out from finals when I was admitted to the hospital, and then ended up getting my diagnosis about a month later during finals and all that craziness, that period of life. And then now I'm in remission through my cancer journey, but still pursuing higher education, currently in junior year of college and studying finance.
Yeah, wonderful. And what are your current goals after you graduate?
So definitely a career. That's my main goal after graduation. I'm currently doing some internships and part-time work in the finance field, trying to get some job experience, move forward, and have a career after graduation. And then other than that, just trying to be active in my community, make friends, everything that any young adult would want to do, I guess. But those are my main goals.
Absolutely. Yes. And when you think back on, especially going through that after diagnosis, it's so hard to get diagnosed when you're actively in a semester of school. Now, when you think back on it, what were the biggest barriers or roadblocks that you encountered pursuing education at that time while going through treatment and diagnosis?
So during diagnosis, it was a very rocky road. There was a lot of um, situations where I wasn't really sure what my next week or my next month would look like. So when I was first sent into the hospital, I was actually at school. I was down in Lynchburg, Virginia. I'd go to Liberty University, and I had to go to the local ER there. Ended up getting admitted, was in the ER for 12 hours that day, got sent up to the Inova Fairfax Hospital, and that's where my treatment journey began. It, for the first month, it was a lot of just medicine, trying to keep me as happy as possible, as comfortable as possible during that time. And then there was a lot of, um, I guess, inconsistency with what they thought my diagnosis was going to be. There was, they thought that it might be this thing called a pheochromocytoma. And so I got sent to the NIH for a week. This is all while trying to juggle some of my classwork, trying to deal with finals coming up, trying to communicate with professors, all those different things, and then ended up being sent back to Inova. And I did most of my finals during the week of my biopsy and my port insertion. So I had just had a surgery. I wasn't exactly in the best physical condition, was still dealing with all these tumors all over my body, things like that. But with through conversations with all of my professors, I was able to push back some of my finals, was able to complete them at different times, but not every professor is, you know, understanding of treatment. I had one professor that said, "Hey, I need you to do your final either today or tomorrow." I was in the middle of my time at the NIH at that point. The next day, I was supposed to have a PET scan coming up, and so I ended up doing the final that day. Well, on a bunch of pain medication, things like that, and just not in the best mental state, not in the best physical state. Sometimes I just had to push through some of those circumstances and complete my finals anyway, try and get it done with. And then I did actually have one class that I did have to drop due to cancer. I was taking an online research class at the time, would have gone about 2 weeks after all of my other classes would have ended, and would have fallen in the first round of chemo, and then also the week of recovery after my first round of chemo. And with all of that coming up, with all of that uncertainty, it just didn't make sense for me to continue the class. And sometimes you will have to change your plans, drop classes, do things like that in order to focus on your cancer journey, to focus on recovery. But that's okay. There's a lot of flexibility there. It's okay if you don't finish college the exact timeline that you wanted to. you do have those other opportunities available. You do have that extra time, and there's no rush. It's you have plenty of life ahead of you. So,
I love that. And what do you think are the tools, resources, strategies that were like the most helpful when you think about like how you were catering your education plan? Like what was most beneficial for you?
so there were a lot of really useful tools. First, I'll just say the staff at the hospital is fantastic. They have dealt with this a lot of times before. Plenty of people have gone through cancer in the hospital, and so just talk to them, have conversations with them. They'll tell you there's more details about how your treatment's going to go, where your energy will be up, higher or lower, what you might be able to do, what you might not be able to do, all those different things that you might not understand going into your treatment journey. I know when I started my treatment, I didn't really know what cancer treatment would look like. I didn't know what my energy levels would be like. I didn't really understand how chemo even worked. And so having those conversations with your doctors and nurses can really help. Also, schools have a lot of resources available. Talk to your advisors, talk to your professors, try and figure out what is the best route for you moving forward. They'll have a lot of resources on what classes to take, when to take them, how many classes might be a good option for you. And then also seek out outside resources. They've provided a lot of resources here for you guys on all the different uh, extra college resources that you can use, all those different classes, all those different routes that you can take. I personally used a program called Sophia that was really useful for me. They have self-paced college courses that you can do whenever you're free, whenever you're able to, and it's done by a monthly subscription fee. They also have partnerships with different schools so that you can make sure that all of your classes will transfer for things that you need and will transfer to the school that you're hoping to go to. So there are resources like that available. You can seek out these things like these self-paced classes so that when you have weeks where you're having a little bit more energy, where you have more ability to do all these different things, you can do that. But then when you also have weeks where you're down in the dumps, where you don't really feel like doing much that week, where you don't have the energy to do much, where you're trying to just focus on going day by day and staying alive, those weeks you don't have to do school. You don't have to have that pressure on you of assignments due or finals coming up or anything like that. So I think those are the three resources that help me the most. But also all the resources that you guys have talked about now, there's so much available for everyone going through cancer.
Absolutely. And so lastly, Conlon, if you had to share in some words of wisdom, some takeaways from your experience, what would that be and what can we leave our participants with today?
So first, I would say just be flexible. You have to adapt to your own personal experiences because everyone's treatment journey is different. Everyone's going to respond to chemo in different ways. Everyone's going to have different chemos they're taking or different routes with radiation or other forms of treatment that are given to them. And you have to adapt to that. You have to be willing to adapt to that. You can't expect during treatment to always do a full credit load and have all of these deadlines and meet them all the time and be able to do that with full energy and full just performance across the board. Sometimes you have to take a step back and say, hey, how does this work for me? What's going to be best for my treatment journey? What's going to be best for my goals? And how do I still move forward, still make those leaps and bounds, still move towards my goals, but also keep in mind that I am going through chemotherapy, that I am going through cancer treatment, whatever that may look like, because that is a difficult thing to deal with. It's not something to just be taken lightly and say, oh, I'll deal with it and figure it out. It's something that you really need to take some time and say, hey, how is this going to affect me trying to seek out school while going through treatment? Additionally, just try to tailor that school to meet your personal goals. It's important to still have goals in mind while you're in treatment, to not just give up on everything because you're dealing with cancer, because you're going through all these different treatment cycles, and also to understand that there isn't life after treatment. After you finish chemo, you're going to still have those goals, those missions, those things that you want to accomplish. And it's okay to still think about that while you're going through treatment. You shouldn't just give up hope and stop moving forward. Also, once again, just talk with the doctors and hospital staff. They know what you're going through. They've seen people go through it before, and they understand how these cycles work. I know for me personally, I would have about a 3 week cycle with treatment. I would have the week of chemo, and then I'd have the week afterwards, which was really a full recovery week. And then I'd have maybe 3 to 4 days in that third week where I'd be feeling better. So that first week of chemo, I'd usually have some energy the first 2 or 3 days before the chemo side effects really hit me. After that, it would tank my energy levels. It would cause a lot of nausea, things like that, that I couldn't really handle a lot of schooling while going through. And then that week afterwards, I had a lot of blood counts drop, things like that, where I didn't have energy, where I was dealing with other side effects from treatment. And then my energy would start bouncing back up that third week. But during that time, there's a lot of ebbs and flows. It's not super consistent where you're going to be able to plan out specific times that you can do classes, where you can have all these different deadlines looming over your head. You have to be willing to be flexible in that and find a route that works in that. And then also don't compare. There are a lot of people who have gone through cancer before you. There will be a lot of people who go through it afterwards, and everyone has a different experience. I heard some stories of people who were going through treatment while still playing tennis and running around and having tons of energy and doing things. With my personal cancer journey, sometimes I wasn't able to stand up and walk across the room. I didn't have the energy to do a lot of things. And that's okay. Everyone goes through these different chemos differently and has a lot of different side effects. Some chemos are more intense than others. Some treatment plans in general are just more intense than others. I also heard of people doing full semester loads in cancer treatment. It is possible, but I personally couldn't handle that much stress on myself. I needed to do these self-paced courses. I needed to seek out other options during my cancer journey so that I could keep moving forward, but I didn't have all of this external stress on me. Just because someone else does something doesn't mean that you have to do it too, or that you're going to be able to do it too. You need to be aware of your own personal experience and tailor things towards that. Dealing with cancer can be a difficult topic. It can be a difficult thing to deal with, but there are so many resources and so many experiences out there. And there really is something for everyone if you just go out, seek it, and try and figure out what's going to work for you. So my final word of advice would just be go do the research, figure it out, and find something that's going to help you reach your goals.
Thank you so much, Conlon. It is so meaningful to hear a bit of your story because I know for myself and I hope for our participants today that it is so helpful to hear from patients themselves. We can provide all the resources and information we want, but it's the patients that actually walk this path. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely. So. That concludes our content for the day. Thank you all for joining us. But we do have some time for questions, if there's any, or comments, or anything that anyone would like to share. Feel free to put it in the chat or unmute. But if you are an AYA patient that's treated on the adult side, or at a different institution, know that your social worker and case managers at your care team can provide guidance, but we also provided myself and Vanessa's contact information for follow-up as needed. But I'll pause here just in case there's any questions or comments from anyone. And perhaps we've given you so much information, you're just going to have to digest it and process it, um, which of course we are happy to have you all follow up with us if you need to. Keep in mind, we are doing more of these AYA talks throughout this fall. We have our next one on September 23rd. That's going to be about navigating cancer cost as an AYA patient. And because that is a big topic that we get asked about, we've touched on careers here, but it is really hard when that might be impacted by a cancer diagnosis. So if you're interested, please feel free to join our go get registered for that on our calendar. All right. So we got a question. Do students apply in their senior year for these college scholarships? Are there important deadlines for students entering their junior year?
Yes, it's most common that the college scholarship application process is during the senior year. I wouldn't say that there's any, in terms of scholarship, important deadlines junior year, but junior year is a great time to research. scholarships and just kind of get a head start. And again, there's even scholarships that you can apply for while you're in college as well. Hopefully that answered your question.
And yeah, I noticed that sometimes a lot of scholarships start the organizations start providing information about their scholarships like the summer usually before that school year. So I often tell our juniors that are finishing up that year and will be going into senior year that that summer as a little homework assignment over the summer is to kind of be checking those websites so that way they don't miss anything.
Yes, exactly. But the scholarships that I was looking into, I know that they provide information, but they don't actually open until surprisingly like the second half of senior year. But yeah, it's definitely good to write those deadlines down because it can, with college applications, and everything going on, it's easy to lose track of all those deadlines.
And again, if there's a different email or any that you'd like me to send resources to, feel free to send me a message. My email's on the screen. And just keep a lookout for our future talks. And especially, we'd love to always hear if there's recommendations for other topics for us to cover.